Alrighty, hello YouTube. Welcome back to Terraform Tidbits. So in this video, I wanted to go over debugging for expressions in Terraform using the Terraform console. Um, so the reason for this is if you've ever been in a position where you have you know you have maybe a local that has a map inside of it, or somewhere else where you're working with a map and you need to kind of transform this map into something else, or you need to iterate over it in a specific way. It can be a little bit tricky to figure out how to get all that to work in Terraform. So um, it's not too difficult to do that, to get these things working, in my opinion, if you work with the Terraform console. So that's the goal of this video, is to kind of look at how to debug these things using the Terraform console and what tools it has available to use. So start off with, just for reference, here's a documentation page that shows all about how the four expressions work in Terraform. So this is definitely a good reference to check out. It has lots of information here. So with that in mind, let's boot up the Terraform console. So all you got to do, change directory into your folder with your Terraform config. So we're working inside here, debugging for expressions. I've already changed into there. And I've already done in the init previously, so I'll just do Terraform console here. And once we're in here, you get just a blank command line experience. The console's not the best. Like, if you try to select and then type, it doesn't have like a, at least as of this version, it's this Terraform 1.3 I'm working on. You can't, it doesn't have the best editing functionality. That aside, though, it still is pretty useful. So before we get too much into the console, let's look at how we have this example set up. So in this fictional example, I have a local variable here, and it has a map of websites. So imagine I'm in an IT department at a company, and my company has a bunch of different websites that they maintain. So they might have a marketing site for external users. They might have an HR portal that employees go to internally. There might be an internal site for a security team at the company. They might have an API portal for the public who wants to use their APIs. Might have an internal documentation site for just like wikis or documentation, stuff like that. And they might have like an ITSM tool internally, or something like that. So in this fictional example, that's kind of what we're working with, is we have these 6 or so sites, and we're not going to get too much into like building any actual infrastructure for this, but we're just using this as a vehicle to explain how to use the Terraform console for the for expression debugging. But anyway, so you have these sites, and for each of these you have some information about them. So for example, for this marketing site, this is a public facing website because you need people to be able to access it from outside the company. The internal HR portal, it is not publicly facing. It's just intended for internal use of the company, things like that. There's also this thing about, does it need a load balancer? So maybe a marketing site does, because there's an expectation that there's going to be a lot of traffic to that site. Likewise for the internal HR portal, but maybe if it's a internal documentation site, you don't need like a crazy load balanced setup for that, etc. And then we just have some example URLs for each of these. So that's the information we're working with. And as somebody working in Terraform, you can use all this information to provision whatever infrastructure you want based on these different properties. So how can we kind of write some for expressions around these and use it to kind of provision different infrastructure? So the first thing I think it's useful to show is, just as kind of a hello world, is in the Terraform console, you can always show information about any of these local variables that you have set up here. So you could just type in the name of it, so it's local.websites, and then if we expand this, it'll show you the exact object that you have defined in your Terraform here. So this local.websites, it evaluates to this map which we have defined in our Terraform. Yeah, so nothing too special, nothing fancy, but it's good to know that's there. So what's another thing you might want to do? All right, so what if you need to, instead of working with this map here, you need to create a new map? Like, for example, maybe you need to remove some properties out of here for something you're working on, or you need to add some new properties to it, or something like that. To do that, you have to use these for expressions. There might be some other ways I'm not thinking off the top of my head, but one way to do it is with a for expression. So probably the simplest example of a for expression here is to basically recreate this map here. And to do that, you can use this expression here. So we're going to open it with a curly brace. So this is, the curly brace is saying we're going to create a new map. And then we're saying, basically, we're going to loop through this website's local. And we're going to say for each workspace, or for each website key and website value. Now this is a map, and so each entry in the map has a key and it has a value associated with it. So as we loop through the local, WS key is going to refer to the key, and WS value is going to refer to the value, which is this object right here. So for each key and value in local.websites, we're going to return, over here is where you say, here's what I'm going to return to the right of this. So what I'm going to return from this expression is a new map. In the map, the keys in the map are the same thing over here, our workspace keys, and the values in the map are going to be our workspace values. So if we do this, this gets us the exact same result as what we saw here, as just saying local.websites. So not too useful yet, but it's good to know that you can use this. You basically say for key and value in your map, you can construct a new map based off of that. So that's kind of that example. All right, now getting into something that might be more useful, let's look at how you can filter this map. So for example, what if you wanted a new map where you just wanted, what if you wanted to just have a map that had all of the websites that are public facing, right? So for example, this internal HR portal, you don't care about this, you don't care about this internal team site. You want to provision some infrastructure and it's just based on the public facing sites. To do this, you can use these if filters in here. So let's walk through this. So again, we're going to say for each key and value in our website's map, we're going to return a new map, and the keys in the map are going to be our existing keys from here. The values in the new map are going to be our values from here. And then we're going to say if our value.public-facing equals true. And just to trace that, what's going on here is it's saying, all right, so our workspace, or our website value, this is the value in our map. So if you go up to your map, the values in our map are these things here, these objects. And so we're saying effectively, if this object dot public facing is true, and then we're filtering it by that. So if we run this, now you get a map that has only 2 entries in it. So it only has the marketing site and the public API developer portal, because these are the only 2 entries in here where public facing is set to true. So that's kind of useful. So you can filter this out and kind of work with it from there. Another handy thing you can do, so now that you've used the console and figured out what this expression needs to be, you can take this and you can drop it into a new local. So you can say, internal websites equals this, or sorry, external websites equals that. Then from that point forward, you can say local.external websites. Now it's going to fail out on me because I have to restart the Terraform console for it to recognize that this was added, but yeah, you get the idea there. So once you figure out what expression you need in here, you can take that and move it back into a new local. So that's kind of handy to know. All right, so let's look at a couple more examples. So a few more examples of filtering local variables. Uh, all right, this showed us all of the externally facing sites. Let's do it again for the internally facing sites. So we're saying for each key and value in our website's map, we're going to create a new map, and then we're going to say where public facing is false. So that's going to give us our internal sites. That gives us a new map that has 4 entries in it. Public facing is always false for each of these. Yeah, so you can kind of play around with the conditions on here to get you what you need. Also, you can use these kind of compound conditions here. So if you need to do a filter based on multiple criteria, here's an example here. So you can say, all right, so for each key and value in our websites, return a new map that goes from your key to your value. And for our filter, we're going to say we're going to get the internal sites, so where public facing is false. So that's going to match up to this list here. So first we're going to filter it down to this list of 4 sites here. And then we're also going to say out of these 4, let's also get the ones that need a load balancer in front of them. So you can do an and value dot needs load balancer. Set that to true. And then there you go. So now both of these sites, they both need a load balancer, and they're both public facing. So you can imagine, yeah, if you have some different configurable things in here, and you set up all your configuration settings and make them changeable, then you can kind of drive your infrastructure creation based on this. And then anytime you need to change something, you could say, well, this site's changing to private, or this one no longer needs a load balancer. And then as long as your Terraform configuration reads this information to work off of, you can kind of it kind of makes it easy to make changes in here. All right, so some other things. So kind of touched on that, where you can store these locals up here for just to make debugging a little bit easier. So here you could say, here's my external websites. If you want to say, here are my internal websites, you could say, let me, oops, did not want to do that. Let's turn on WordPress so we can see the whole thing here. So if you want to say just my internal websites, so create a new map where a public facing is false. And then if you want to say, I want my internal websites without or internal websites with load balancer, you could say, give me the ones that are not public facing and value dot needs load balancer equals true. All right, and then you can have other code now that reference these wherever you want. And let's look at that just to show that it works. So you could say local dot websites. This gives you your original map. If you want your external websites, now you can say local dot external websites. That filters it down. Local dot internal websites. Filters it down again. And then local dot internal websites with a load balancer. Right. And so now that you have all these different maps you can work with, you can provision infrastructure in different ways based off of them. All right. All right, so here's another thing. So I mentioned this earlier, all right, so let's, I don't know if it doesn't support clear. No, it doesn't. So, all right, so let's say you have your original map and you want to construct a new map that is missing a couple of these properties or has a few more properties or something like that. So sometimes that's handy. So to do that, you can do this. So you could say for each key and value in our website's map, we're going to create a new map, and the key in our new map is going to be our existing key. However, the value for it, instead of just using the existing value right here, we can construct a new object and use a different object. Excuse me. for our new map. So we could say here's a new object. We're gonna say our URL equals our existing URL. And now we have a new map. So instead of it having this structure with all these properties, now it has, just one property in it. Whether that's useful, I don't. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Maybe a better example would be you could use it to calculate information about your original map. So you could say for each key and value in your websites, create a new map. So here's your key, and then you could say URL length equals the length of your value.url. And then there you go. So, all right, so this information wasn't in your original map. From here, you didn't have any information about what this, about the length of the URL in here, but based on this, you can construct a new map that has extra information added to it. And, you can add as many properties as you want here. So, handy to know. One other thing to cover is that you can return sets as well. So instead of just returning a map, you can also return sets. So sometimes that's handy. So instead of using a curly brace here, use a square brace, and that tells Terraform that you're working with a set or a list, one of the two. I wish they would separate those out. But so for each key and value in your website's list, return your URL. All right, and so now it gives you here's a list of URLs here. So instead of having this kind of convoluted map here with all this extra stuff, sometimes you just need a list of strings to work with. So you could do this if you wrap it in to set, then it gives you back a set to work with. So sometimes you want to work with a list, sometimes you want to work with a set. Just kind of depends on what you're doing. Right, the last example here is using sets here, but also combining it with the filtering. So so here we're going to return a list of our URLs here. We're going to return a list of all the websites, but we're only going to return the URLs for sites that are internal only, so not public facing. So to do that, you can for each key and value in local.websites, return the URL. All right, so that gives us our URL back. But then you go back and you add the filtering, which we did earlier up here, where we were filtering by if it's public facing or not. You can use this here and say, give us the websites that are not publicly facing. And there you go. So it's handy to know. So you can kind of have a map originally. You can filter out the map as much as you want. You can transform the map into a list. You can transform it into a set. You can filter it and transform it into a list or a set. You can use multiple conditions in here, and so it's kind of handy to know how this works if you have a lot of code that kind of looks like this, where you have these different maps and they need to interact with each other in different ways. And trying to figure out the syntax for all this without like an interactive way to test it, such as the Terraform console, can be pretty tricky and time consuming. So that's that. The last thing I just wanted to show is that now if you combine this with actually provisioning resources, that's where it starts to get more useful, I think. So I'm just creating a null resource here. So you can imagine that this could exist, represent some kind of a cloud resource, like a storage account in Azure or S3 bucket in AWS, or whatever you're working with. But here you could say for each entry in local.websites. So Now we're going to create one of these resources for each of our websites that we've defined. So this should create six of these null resources, one for each of those. So if we do plan, oh, whoops, don't have my shortcuts set up. Right, so, all right, with that, so it's going to create a null resource for the internal documentation site, internal HR portal, ITSM tool, security team site, etc. So, right, you can do that, but then you can combine it with all the other stuff we just looked at. So maybe I want to create this resource only for internal websites only. So here you can say for each of our internal websites, and then our internal websites we're filtering that original websites list there, and now it's only going to create these resources for the 4 that it gets filtered down to. Or I could say, yeah, you could say maybe this is a load balancer is what we're creating. So if you want to create a load balancer, or you could say this is an internal load balancer, and I'm only going to create an internal load balancer for each of the internal websites which need a load balancer. If you do that, then it'll filter everything down for you. Yeah, so that's all I had for today. That's kind of the Terraform console. You can use it to kind of validate these expressions, make sure they're working correctly, and especially given how kind of tricky the for each syntax can be in Terraform, I find it pretty handy for debugging. So that's all for today. Appreciate your time, and have a good day. Thanks.